What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel, One Man Startup. Today's episode we're going to start coding out the homepage cards. So if you look over here, this is kind of what our finished product is going to look like by the end of this video. We're not going to have the images on the background there, but we will have all the data coming in and it'll be a scrollable list. So we're going again off of our design from a few videos back. So these are the cards we're building out. All right, let's get started. Where we left off in the last one is we have our tab bar set up. But if you remember, we put all of our pages just in this one page file. So first, let's go ahead and create a new file. And we're going to call this the home view. And that'll be a Dart file. And then from our page file, we can go ahead and just copy this home page and just remove it from there and go ahead and put that in the home view. And we're actually going to want to refactor this. So if you right click it, we can find refactor, and then we want to rename it. We're actually going to call this the home view, not the home page. And I think that'll just be a better naming convention in general for these things, for these views, because we don't want it to get too confusing. But yeah, basically that's what we're going to call. We're going to start calling our individual screens views now. The other thing we want to pull over is this material import. All right. And then if you remember, we were calling this in our home widget. So we need to just change this as well to be the home view. And we need to also import this new file that we just created, which is going to be the home view file. And now everything should work just as it did before, but now we're using this home view. Now we're using this new home view file. All right, and just to see that this works, we change the color here orange, and now that page is orange. Perfect. All right, so now the first thing we want to do here is just go ahead and remove the color. We're going to just keep it white for now. And we want to build a list view out here. So go ahead and hot reload that. To build a list view is pretty simple. We just need to, we can still build the list inside this container. So after that, we'll just do the child. So the child of this container will be a new list view. And we're actually going to use the list view builder right here. So this takes two useful items, which is the item builder and an item count. So let's just put the item count at 0 for now and the builder at nothing for now. Actually, let's go ahead and first build out a list. So let's do let's just get a list of cities so that we can populate this list view with. All right, that's good. So now we can use this trip list for our item count actually. So we'll use the length of that, and that should give us our item count. That doesn't need the parentheses. And then our item builder here, let's go ahead and use, we can use the build context, which will just, this context will basically tell us, keep the card that we're using in the proper spot. And then we're also going to take the index here. All right, so in our item builder, we want to return a container. And then that container is going to build out the card. So let's create the card like that. And from there, we want the card to just be one column. So the child of the card is going to be a column. And then this column is actually going to have multiple children. And those are going to be the widgets within the column. So these are going to be the different elements of text. So the first one for now, let's just go ahead and use the index as a string. And then the second one, let's go ahead and actually print out that title. So that's going to be our trips list at the index. All right, and then here we just need a semicolon. All right, and then when we run that, we should see our list coming through. Not fully styled, but it's beginning to form together there. One quick thing that we can do now is remove out, instead of building out the card right here inside of our actual build method, let's go ahead and pull that out into its own widget. So go ahead and pretty much right below this build, we want to create a new widget. And we're going to call this build trip card. And this is going to actually go ahead and this is going to take these two parameters here. So we just put that there. And is essentially going to build out this container. So we can take this whole piece here and remove it and then place it in here. And let's just put new. We want to return a new container there. And now within this function, we can call this function here. Since it's just a one-liner, we can actually just write it like this and give it these two parameters. And that should do it. Oh, okay. Actually, we don't want to give it, we just want to give it the context and the index there. And if we run that, nothing should actually change. It should just look the same. But now this is a little bit cleaner, so our build method stays a bit cleaner. And now we can build our trip card down here. The other good thing about this is if we end up using these cards in different locations, which we might in the past trips as well, this can later on become a widget of its own, pull it out into its own file, and our code will just be cleaner in general. All right, the next thing we want to do is create a model for our data for these cards. So right now we're obviously just printing out a simple text string in the index. But this list here, we don't want to be a list of strings. We actually want to be a list of our trip data. So let's model out that data by creating a new class. And actually, let's go ahead and create a new file, not a new folder. It'll be a Dart file, and we're just going to call this the trip. And then in here, this is going to be a pretty simple class. And this is just going to model our data. So a trip is going to consist of a few variables. And they're all going to be final. The first one will be a string. And it's going to be, we'll just call it the title. This will be the title of basically the title of the trip, which would be basically the location. The next one is going to be a date time type, and this is going to be the start date. And similarly, we're going to do the end date. The next thing is going to be a double type, and this is going to be the budget. It's a double because we want it to be able to have cents on it. We want it to be able to have a decimal point, and int won't allow that, so make that double. And the last one is going to be a string, and this is going to be the travel type. And that's going to basically be like if we're traveling by car, plane, etc. And then we just need to initialize this class, and how we do that is just calling this on each of these types. So the title, this start date. All right, so what this is doing here is when we create a new instance of this class, it's basically just going to take these parameters, which are all of the parameters that we need, and is going to initialize each of them. So when we create one of these trip classes, we're going to need to pass it these 5 different variables. And then they're just going to be stored in this trip object. So what that's going to allow us to do is if we create a trip, which actually let's just go ahead and create a trip. So in here, we want to change this to, well, first let's import our new file, which is just called trip. And this list, we want to be a list of trips. So list of type trip. So to create a new one, you can see already that it's going to come up in the autofill. We want to create a new one with all these variables. So the title can be, which we know is a string, can be New York. The start date, we can actually just use the date right now. All of this later is going to be coming from the database, but that's not set up yet, so we can just use datetime.now. Same for the end time. And the budget can be anything. And the travel type is just a string, which we'll just make car for now. So that's going to create one trip object. Let's just go ahead and create the other 5. All right, great. So now we have our trip list set up with our trip objects. And now we can start calling those, instead of just calling it by calling just the index here, we can call this trip list index is going to get us 1 row of these, right? And then from there we can just call, with dot notation, we can call any of those objects or any of those parameters inside the object, inside the trip object. So let's just go ahead and print all those out as text. So the title, let's see, the date. First we can make this the trip. But let's pull this out into right there. So now we have this trip variable, which we can just use in place of that. I think it makes it a little bit cleaner looking. And all right, so we have our trip title there. The next thing we're going to do is do the time. So we don't want the time to, or I'll show you, if we just use the start date and end date, we need to convert them to strings. Oh, to string. If we run this, we can see that it's printing out the full date time object. So we don't actually want that entire date time object. So there's a plugin that we can use to format the date. And so let's add that package in. It's actually going to be called, let's open up the pub spec YAML file, and we're going to include this intl package, and just go ahead and get that package there, and Flutter will load that in, and then back in our home view, we want to just import that package, which is going to look like, let's see, is going to look like package, and it's called yes, this is it right here. All right, and then with that package, what we can actually do is call date format on this. So it's it's a date format, and then we'll pass it the format we want, which for this is going to be the day, the month is capitalized there, and then the year, all 4 letters of it. And then we're going to be formatting this this date from our trip object. So put that in those parentheses. We don't actually want the string part in there. We're going to format this and then convert it to a string. So if you save that on the one, you can see what the hot reload it, you can see the difference between the two of these. That obviously formats our date nicely like that. Now the next thing, we don't actually want the dates on 2 lines, we want them on 1 line. So we want to create one long string that has this date and the next date. So go ahead and put this in quotes to be a string. And to place actual Dart code inside a string, we can do some string interpolation here. And to do that, you do a $sign and then open up this bracket and close the bracket behind it. So that's our actual Dart code there. And then we're going to put a dash because we're back in the string. And then we're going to do the same thing and add our Dart code again. And you could pretty much just copy this whole piece here because it's going to be very similar, but we're going to, instead of having start date here, we're going to have end date. And yes, right now those are the same date, but when we get our actual data plugged into this, it's not going to be the same date. So now those should be on 1 line. Great, that looks good. The next thing we want to do then is to put the, let's see, we have our budget and our travel type. These we're going to actually go ahead and make into a row. So because we want these on the same line. So make a row, and the children of this are going to be it's going to be just text, 2 text fields. The first one will be the trip of the budget, and the next one will be the trip of the travel type. All right, so run that, and you'll notice that, oh, okay, we got an error right there. The trip budget actually needs to be converted to a string as well. So go ahead and update that and run it. All right, so you'll notice in this row, everything's kind of crammed over to the left. So we can fix that by actually adding a spacer right here. And the spacer is going to just is going to fill all the empty space wherever you have the spacer. So before it just defaulted basically to having a spacer at the end. Now our spacer's in the middle, and we're set up more like this. So that looks pretty good right now. A few things. Let's go ahead and actually do the same thing up here and create rows for both the... Let's create a row for both the title and another row for the... Yeah, let's create a row for the title there, and then let's also create a row for the date. And this is actually just going to allow us to choose where we lay them out horizontally on this. I need to write child here. Actually, children. The children of this row are going to be a widget. And that'll be take an array of widgets. And okay, that was a little messy, but there we go. I think we're good on that one. And this one, let's see, do children of the widget is an array, and just clean that up. And the end of this will be, nope, right there. All right, and then we want to add the spacers here as well. And we always want to keep these trailing commas because it helps with the formatting of it when you auto format, which you can do by right clicking and reformat code with Dart format, and that'll kind of get all your lined, it'll line everything back up nicely. But if you don't leave these trailing commas, it doesn't always look as nice. All right, so that looks good. Let's run it and see. Okay, now everything's on the left there, so that's fine. The next thing we want to put some padding on these cards. So the card itself you can put padding on the card itself by actually you can put padding around the column of the card. We can do this by writing it out, but if you just click on the column here, the easiest way to do this is actually hover over this light bulb icon and go down and just click this add padding, and that's going to automatically just put the padding around our column, and it's doing it on all edges with an 8-point padding. So we can run that and see what it looks like. It looks all right, but let's go ahead and make this actually 16. So make that a little bit more padded up. All right, that looks good. Now we also want to add some padding in between the different rows here. So to do that, very similarly, if you just hover on a row, we can add padding. Now this one we don't want the padding on all of them, because if you run it, you can see it's going to indent our title a little bit too much. So instead of all, just do only here, and then we can just tell it we want 8 padding on the top and we want 8 padding on the bottom. All right, that looks good. If we run that now, New York will be padded on the top and bottom. Let's go ahead and add 8 padding to all 3 of our rows. All right, that looks pretty good. Run that, and now everything's a bit more spaced out. So the next thing, we want to enlarge the size of this New York title. So right after we have our title here, we can put a comma and write style, and now we can give it some style. So let's go ahead and just give it a new text style, and we're just going to change the font size right now. And if you go actually back into our Xd file, you can, because this is all built to scale, you can go ahead and see what size fonts we were using. So right here we had 30 for New York. So go ahead and open up, or go back to this, and back in here we can just give it the font size of 30. And then when we run that, which we need to pull this window back up, now our title looks good there. I think actually for our bottom spacing, we can just lower this slightly, maybe to 4, just to bring the date up a little bit higher. And then also let's go ahead and lower the top padding of this to 4 on the actual date field. The date size, I think we're just going to leave it how it is. But the bottom padding on the date, let's just go ahead and increase that to 80, which will enlarge our card as a total. That looks good. Let's go ahead though and now update the style for the font on our budget. So go ahead and very similarly to above, do the style. The budget, I believe, is a bit bigger. Let's see, it's 39 on there. So let's just go ahead and make that. Let's just go ahead and make it 35 though. I think 39 might be actually a little bit too big. That looks good. If you'll notice, we're not getting both decimal points here after the dollar amount. So to fix that, instead of using toString, we're going to want to do toString as fixed, and then we can pass it an int, and that's going to be how many decimal points after, or that's going to be how many decimal points out we go. So that looks good. Now it's money. The other thing is, let's go ahead and add a $sign in front of here. So to do this, we can put this whole, or go ahead and put this whole thing in quotes here, where we're doing before the style. And again, we're going to string interpolate that. So keep our Flutter, or keep our Dart code inside of the string there. So nothing should change there. But if you notice, if we just try and do a $sign here, it's not going to work, because the $sign actually denotes that we're going to be doing a Flutter variable right after it, or a Dart variable right after it. So we need to escape that. And to do that, we just use a /. So if you run that, this /$ $sign actually just means print out an actual $sign. Whereas this $sign without the / means what's following is going to be dark code, not part of the actual string. The last quick thing we can do is just change, instead of printing car here, let's go ahead and just print out an icon for the car. So we can use icon and then the icons. And let's see what car. If we start typing car, there's one getting, oh, here's a car. Directions car. And then let's go ahead and remove the travel type. For now, actually, let's just go ahead and leave it how it is. We'll end this video here. Once we get the database set up and we're pulling those icons, when we're pulling the data from the database, we'll change this icon depending on what the actual value is here. But yeah, this looks good for now. This is a good start. In this video, we got our scrolling list of card views, and we're pulling all the data from this new trip model that we built, which is basically set up now to pull data into the database, or data from the database. So in the next episode, we're actually going to start setting up our database in our backend and getting this trip data uploaded into the database. So once we have that, we'll actually be able to pull our live data into these cards, and they won't just be these static typed out versions of that. But we will be keeping this trip model and just filling it with that data from the database. But yeah, this is a great start to this homepage view, and that's going to be it for this video. All right, ciao for now.